The success of your divorce will start off and end off with you. It's how you act, how you show up, how you behave. It has nothing to do with the other person. The other person may try to make your life miserable. If you play victim, then you're giving them everything that they wanted. And you're feeding them the frenzy and you're allowing them to do it and to continue. So if you're dealing with a very difficult person, what's their mission? Is to push you against the corner. So you're stuck in that corner and you're not getting out. So that way they can control you. So your job is not to necessarily play defense, but to play offense. And so if you allow the other person to put you in that corner to the point where you can't get out, it means you've done something wrong and they understand that they can do that to you.
Hey y'all, Josh Tomeoni with the Derelict Podcast. Welcome back. We're so glad you're here. Would you do me a favor? It will only take you a couple seconds. Whether you're listening or watching right now, will you head on over to YouTube and hit that subscribe button? It really helps us get this message to more and more people that we can help. Greatly appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. My name is Josh Tomeoni, and we are so happy to have you here again. Today, I'm really excited about this topic, and frankly, we could have multiple episodes about this topic, and we probably will. But today, I invited an expert in the field of divorce. She is a divorce coach, Ravit Rose. She is a divorce scientist, which I'm really curious to know what that even means. So I'm looking forward to you explaining that here in a little bit, Ravit. But she's had plenty of experience helping people go through a very difficult transition like a divorce process. And she actually even wrote a book called Unwanted Nasty Divorces. She went through a pretty contentious divorce herself, so we might get into that a little bit, especially because I did also. And don't worry, this is not going to be a I hate my ex club. We're going to tell all of these terrible stories and end up in a lawsuit somewhere. That's not the point of today. But here is the point of today. If you have gone through any difficult relationship transition, or maybe are currently going through a relationship transition, or maybe think that you might in the future, it might be good to pay attention. Here's what I've noticed. There's a lot of coaches out there that pretend to know what somebody's going through that have never gone through it before. How could you possibly have somebody help you as a life coach, personal coach, divorce coach, if they've never even been through a divorce? Or maybe their divorce was easy and they've always been friends with their ex and there's never been any issues. Not my story, not Ravit's story. So with that, Ravit Rose, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. And I've enjoyed all of our pre-conversations that we've had. You have a lot of wisdom. And I know we're on a tight schedule today, so let's jump right into it. How's that sound?
Perfect.
All right, perfect. So maybe we'll just start with a little bit of your story. Again, this is not a I hate the ex club, right? We're not going to get into all the details and everything else, but just maybe could you just tell us a little bit about kind of your divorce that you went through and how that really brought up any sort of a passion to work with other people going through the same process?
Absolutely. So I got divorced about 14 years ago, thought it was going to be easy, turned out to be extremely litigious, spent over $100,000 in legal fees to finally understand this is nothing but a game that I didn't understand and neither does anybody else. So I started diving deeper into like this world of like, what on earth is going on here with me? And I started questioning me and God and what did I do wrong? And I thought I was doing something wrong to deserve this kind of life. And like, what did I do to land on such crazy, chaotic situations? So my life before the divorce was great. I never really had issues and with the marriage, there were some issues, but I never grew up with this much tension and craziness ever. So it was all new to me. And so after a couple of years, about 6 years into my divorce, really questioning everything on this planet, I started to talk to people and I realized that there was a lot of similarities between what I was going through and other people were going through. And when I'm talking like 14 years ago, like in those days, there weren't as many resources as there are now. So basically I started to study divorce and study like the art of like, what the fuck is going on, and that led me to publish my book there, Unwanted Nasty Divorces. And this started the conversation of divorce and what's going right, what's going wrong. and like, what can we do about it at that point? Fast forward a couple of years later, I then became a divorce coach. I opened a divorce center, started working with different professionals from different industries and trying to put like a program together to make sense of the divorce versus it just being about going to the lawyer and like sort of fighting it out. So fast forward then, created a divorce app, and really started getting out there. And now we evolved into iRuse, which is a divorce directory. And also, we basically connect parents with professionals all across the US and Canada. So we help you find the professionals that you need in order to cut your legal costs, in order to cut the emotional pain, and to cut the amount of time that it takes to divorce and do the opposite of what you and I went through, essentially.
I love that. I love that so much. And for everybody listening or watching, check out the resources below, iruse.com, and we will put a link to that. So if you need any sort of person along the team, you can find them there. So I want to talk about that though for a second, Ravit, and that is, I think I mentioned to you before as well, I also wrote an ebook about, the biggest traps to avoid when you're going through a divorce. And one of the 5 that I mentioned is picking the wrong team. And you already brought that up because from my experience as well, a lot of the times people are just mad at each other. They get an attorney, they get whatever the most expensive attorney is that they can afford just to fight each other and, do this in court for years, like both you and I have done. I mean, I've been to court several times, even since I've been divorced, because it just keeps happening, right? You relate to that as well. Yeah. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the team. Like, why would somebody want a divorce coach versus just an attorney, as an example?
So there are 2 ways to divorce, the right way and the wrong way. The right way is that you save on the emotional pain, you save on the costs, and you do things in a way where you really think about your divorce legacy. What is the legacy you want to leave behind to your children? What do you want them to say about your divorce? Do you want them to come back and say, my mom and dad were like the worst enemies and they made my life miserable and whatever, and then your child ends up growing up with traumas and pains and all that to deal with? Because guaranteed they will if that's the kind of divorce that you're going through. Or would you rather them say, my parents got divorced, it wasn't easy, but we, worked out, and now we do like weddings and holidays and dinners together and birthdays and whatever, and it's fine, everybody moved on with their lives. So the most important thing is you have to think of what is that legacy you want to leave behind, because that will sort of predict like what kind of like pathway you're going to take. So if you say, I want to leave a solid divorce legacy behind to my children, then you go the right way. If you're saying the opposite, then you're going to go the wrong way. So the first option is to think that your only 2 professionals that you should have when you're getting divorced is like this sharp, badass lawyer and a therapist. If you're really going out for that badass lawyer, it means you're going out to fight. If you're going out to fight, it's going to cost you time, cost you money, and I guarantee you're not going to leave a very positive legacy behind at all. You can't possibly do that. If you're going in with the intent of saying, you know what, she and I or he and I, we both just don't get along. We shouldn't be married. And therefore, we just need to figure out ways to move forward so that everyone in the family can just move on, go on, rebuild, restructure their new life, and then start over. So if you're really you have the intention of leaving that legacy behind, that good legacy behind, and you really want everyone to move forward, even though you're not happy with your husband or your wife, and you're not happy with what happened, really what you're looking at is the future. And if you're focusing on the future and you're focusing on your end goal and where you want to take your life, then you're going to do things the right way, which is not necessarily running to a sharp, badass lawyer, but maybe thinking about mediation or using a financial neutral. And financial neutral is, let's say, a professional who only deals with the financial side of things. So if you have a lot of assets and retirement plans and this and that and whatever, and the biggest point of contention is the money part, then you would use a financial expert, or a financial neutral which kind of acts like a mediator. And there you've just cut off the lawyer, right? So you may not need a lawyer because you could just use this one expert who will help you to define and lay out all the dollar parts, whether it's to create a settlement offer, whether it's to review one, whether it's to go through budgets, whether it's just to look at the numbers and look at the projections and like, what's the future value of the money? And if you split this property with that, what's going to happen today and then in the future? Because a lot of people forget to actually think about the tax implications of a lot of the things that they do. And then they walk out of their divorce, they sign the agreement, and they get this whopping bill of like $10,000 of a tax bill that they had no idea they had to pay. So you could use a neutral, you could use a financial expert with or without your lawyer as well. And then if you use your lawyer, you can choose a mediator or choose a heart-centered, resolution-oriented lawyer who's not out to bill you excessively because all they're thinking about is the dollars and to empty out your bank account so that they can go buy themselves some, something very nice and fancy schmancy. But really the idea is that you keep your money to yourself. So that's how you do things the right and the wrong way.
Yeah. So you said several really great things that I want to touch on here real quick. The first one that I'll touch on is the financial piece. So I learned the hard way when going through my divorce that generally speaking, even really good attorneys, and I had really good attorneys, do not understand numbers and they do not understand finances. And that is not a diss towards them at all. That's not their job. That's not their occupation. That's not their expertise. So, I myself have owned a financial planning company for 18 years. I know finances very well. I know math very well, and I understand that. And one thing that I can say to everybody listening is if you go through a divorce and you do not have a financial expert, you are in a lot of trouble. You just are, because the attorney is not going to understand certain things. One thing that you brought up, which I think is really key, is tax implications. So let me just use a common example. Somebody getting divorced has a 401k, let's say, or some other sort of retirement plan. Oftentimes, the tax calculation based on what might come out of that 401k in the future is, first of all, not even done correctly. It's not even done based on income, or it's maybe not even looked at all. Maybe the tax implications aren't even looked at. Second of all, a big mistake here is, let's say that somebody is getting divorced, the other person has a bigger, they also make more money. Well, when that happens and you are receiving part of that 401k, if your tax bracket's going to be dramatically different than the tax bracket was before, whether you're making a lot more money or a lot less money than the other person, that could greatly influence how much money you actually get from that account later on. And that's never part of the conversation. The conversation is always, here's what's in it. Maybe we'll look at some tax consequences, but we're not going to look at how you're actually going to pull the money out. So as an example, let's say that you think you're going to get hit with 30% taxes, but you're in such a high income tax bracket, you're actually going to get hit with 50 by yourself, but you would have gotten hit with 30 with your partner. That's a big difference. That's a really big difference. And it should be calculated when you're looking at the numbers. So that's just one example.
So one of the biggest problems with that is that people say, well, I'm already paying my lawyer a ton of money. Why would I pay these other professionals? Because if you don't use the services of other professionals, like such as a financial expert, it's going to end up costing you more in the long run. So you're looking at today's value, you're looking at your legal bills. But even if, like you were asking me before about a divorce coach, if you were to use the help of a divorce coach, they can help you to ensure that you're emotionally balanced, that you're walking into your mediation or your legal processes, or you're having your discussions with your lawyer with a sane, reasonable mind. And if you're having a hard time coping, or she did this or he did that or something, you go to your divorce coach and you sort of vent it out and you talk about it, right? So coaching is not like therapy. So coaching is to help you with coping strategies and help you to move forward in life. We're not here to analyze your past and what happened in your childhood or diagnose anybody. It's to provide you with those tools and strategies that you need to get you to the next level. And sometimes the next level is, to speak to someone, vent it out. And a divorce coach is usually less expensive than your hourly legal bills. So if you go to your coach to help you to manage and cope and all of that, use your financial specialist to help you put all the numbers together, and you use your lawyer then to go and craft and write it out. But all these people, the coach and the financial expert, will help to make sure to give you the proper documentation or the wording that you need in your legal agreement to ensure that you're not going to come back and reopen Pandora's box because you made a mistake, because your lawyer didn't tell you. And how come they didn't advise you of X, Y, and Z? Because it's not their job. And too many people rely on their lawyers to be the one all be all and give me everything that I need to know. And that's where they make the greatest mistake. And those are the ones that end up in an expensive divorce.
It's like going to a general doctor, a general practitioner, and expecting them to be an expert on toenails. I mean, it's just not going to happen, right? Or your throat or anything else. It's And again, this is not anti-attorney. Here's the thing here's another thing just on the financial side, since I'm kind of on that spot right now. The other thing is a lot of people might say, well, a lot of this stuff is just a calculation. You go online for most states, at least in the United States. I don't know how it is in Canada. Most states, you go online if you're talking alimony, child support, that sort of thing. A lot of them just have calculators where you just input numbers and you're like, well, how could you input numbers wrong? Trust me, you can input numbers wrong. And not only because you're not looking at necessarily all the implications of that, tax being one of them for sure. But the other thing is, what does that financial situation look like when you're separate versus when you're together? And that's a big difference. It really is a big difference.
Exactly.
So good stuff, really good stuff. So maybe just one other thing too on what you mentioned, because I loved what you said. And I think it's a good distinction between therapy and coaching. So I'm a big fan of both for the right reason, but I think too many people use therapy when they need coaching. And so I'll explain what I mean by that. As you said, therapy's main purpose is to look at past trauma and how it's affected you. That's it. That's all therapy is. Let me look at my past. Let's look at what used to happen. Let me look at my past trauma, and then let me deal with it so that I can move on with my life. Therapy never looks into the present future. The job of therapy is not to coach you on how to move forward. It's to help you look back and be able to move forward from that. Versus my experience with coaching, at least the men I've coached, and I'm sure this is true for you as well. The purpose of coaching is, let's figure out where you're stuck today. I don't care about what happened to you 25 years ago. Not that I don't care. It's just not my job. Go to a therapist for that. Let's figure out where you're stuck today. What are those limiting mindsets? What are those beliefs? Why are you bringing a different state into it? You mentioned that. I think that's really, really key for coaching. I wish I would have had a coach when I was going through divorce.
Me too.
Here's a couple of the reasons why. My attorneys tried their best, but I don't feel like they were the best mindset coaches. Like, they tried. But when I would walk into mediation, which we had to do, based on our state, because every state's different. Some states require you to go to mediation before you go to court. Ours is one of those. We were required to go to mediation. And when I walked in those rooms, the only reason I was able to have any sort of good headspace, good energy, etc., when I was walking in there, didn't have anything to do with my attorney. It had to do with the mentors in my life that I reached out to. And I said, look, this is what's happening. I need to be in a good space, because if I'm not in a good space in mediation, it's going to be very bad for me and very bad for my kids. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons I wish I would have had a coach. Do you see that with the people that you coach, or what do you think is like their biggest thing where like, oh, this is really helpful? What would you say?
So the biggest shift we see, or I see specifically, is, for example, because you're talking predominantly to men, right? So men who are uncertain what to do, what are the next steps. They don't want to destroy the kids' lives. They want to do this in such a way where, she is not going to become like this vengeful, crazy woman. How does he do this in such a way, in like pre-planning? So we help a lot on the pre-plan, how to have a conversation, what to do, what not to do, and really to go through like that emotional, like roller coaster ride of everything that they're going through. The second step, then, it would be that, for instance, he decides to go and separate. Sometimes actually the men that we work with decide to stay married, which is great, because we're not pro-marriage or pro-divorce, we're pro-helping you, whatever that looks like to you. So if he decides to go and separate, then it's like the emotional, ups and downs, and being able to feel balanced. So we usually work with men who have higher powered jobs. They need to show up every single day, do the work. They're being watched all the time. And they need like a space to be able to be comfortable and to vent and really to set them back on track. And I'm the kind of person who says, hold on, like Josh, for example, stop repeating the same story. Stop going back into that. We already dealt with that. Stop playing victim and move on. We talked about it. We went through it. You just keep circling back into the same thing because it's human behavior to do that. But we need to pull you out of that. You need to be more logical based and, less like repeating the sagas and the dramas and all the she said, she did this, that, whatever. So we do have a space for going and venting and all that. But the next step is coping strategies. Let's get you moving forward. Let's keeping you on your end goal. And I know the divorce process. So I know what you're going to be going through. I know how to have the conversations with other individuals where a therapist will not know. And they are not trained in divorce. They're there to help you with mental health issues or diagnosis or things like that. That's not the same thing. So sometimes people will have a combination of a coach and a therapist. So if you're going through a lot emotionally and maybe there's like adultery and you're trying to cope with that, and then there's, other things that come up from your past. Okay, so you use a therapist for that, but then your coach could help you to move forward throughout the divorce process. Because otherwise, if you're going to use a therapist to help you move forward, it's going to take you a long time and it's going to take you years until you feel like you can actually get out of it.
Yeah, I remember when I didn't have a coach at this time. I had a business coach, but I didn't have a personal coach help me through the divorce process. But I remember walking in my therapist's office after I'd been seeing him, honestly, for a couple of years, dealing with I'd never gone to therapy before. So this was about much more than just the divorce for me. There was a lot of stuff to unpack. And I remember after a couple of years, I just walked into his office and I said, okay, I'm done talking about my past. I'm done. We've already dealt with all of it. Like maybe we haven't, maybe it'll take me the rest of my life. Maybe I could be in therapy. Like those people that are in therapy for 30 years and never change, which you always have to wonder, why are you in therapy then? If you've been doing this for 30 years, that seems like an addiction or a crutch to me, instead of you actually changing your life.
Well, that's because they're telling the therapist what the therapist wants to hear.
Absolutely they are. Of course.
It's not even about them and their progress anymore. It's just, I want to please you and I just want to keep coming here because it feels good and cushy.
And frankly, it feels really good to be able to tell everybody, oh yeah, I'm in therapy. It's kind of like a badge of honor. Well, especially for women, maybe not as much for men, because usually when men say they're in therapy, people are like, what the fuck's wrong with you? When women are in therapy, they're like, good for you. But is it really good for you? Again, it's like seeing any practitioner for 30 years and not getting any better. I would wonder if that practitioner is actually doing anything for you.
Probably not. So I work closely with psychologists and doctors and things like that. We do a lot of we're studying human behavior. So in everything that we do, we're trying to figure out the human brain, which is where the divorce scientist comes from. What makes someone go from normal to crazy, from reasonable to unreasonable? What makes someone stuck? Why are they stuck? And how do we get them unstuck? So one of the things that we've come to understand is if you're using your therapist or you're going to a therapist for more than 3 months, it's not doing the job. Unless you have a history of enormous amount of trauma and one thing after another. But if it's not, and you're just repeating the same things all the time, it's just you not wanting to move forward.
Interesting. I don't know if I agree with your 3-month analogy, but I understand what you're saying. And I definitely would say that, just because I don't think you can put a time limit on that. That's just from my experience with people. It would be like putting a time limit on my grief, putting a time limit on how long does it take me to move on and develop another relationship.
The therapist is not meant to get rid of your entire grief. It's to help you understand it. Then you go and process it. If it takes you 6 months or 9 months to process it after, okay, that's fine. That takes you however long. But to go to the therapist on a regular basis and repeat the same stories and repeat the same things, it means you're stuck. So
yeah, no, I agree. I 100% agree with that. And I wanted to actually come back to one of the things that you said, because I think for myself, one of the biggest things that I coach men on all the time is just limiting mindsets, limiting beliefs, whatever is keeping them from moving forward. And I think it's true for all of us. It's definitely true for me, to be honest. I still have limiting beliefs and limiting mindsets. I have a coach for myself. I am always working with a coach myself, because how am I supposed to coach others if I'm not being coached on my own stuff, right? I'm even going to an event tomorrow for that, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I want to come back to that, because I think that that's one of the main things that a coach brings that a therapist isn't. And from my experience, to your point, I think there's a lot of people that being in therapy, again, gives them some sort of warm, cozy feeling, but then also they play the victim.
Yeah.
It's always somebody else's fault. So I want to actually come back to something you said a long time ago, near the beginning of this episode. And you're talking about, developing a better relationship, let's say with your ex, and it's going to be a co-parenting and all that sort of stuff. So going back to victim mentality, and also that, because I think you're going to relate to this because you had a very contentious divorce. I did as well. What if the other person's not willing? You can only do so much. So how do you coach somebody not to have a victim mentality and to do the best that they can irregardless of what the other person does. Let's just say that they're the worst person in the world and they're never going to change and they're never going to bring anything good to the table. Let's just use an extreme situation. How would you coach me, let's say, if the other person's like that, on how I'm not a victim, how I can move forward, and how I can be the best version of that, irregardless of how they act?
The success of your divorce will start off and end off with you. It's how you act, how you show up, how you behave. It has nothing to do with the other person. The other person may try to make your life miserable. If you play victim, then you're giving them everything that they wanted. And you're feeding them the frenzy and you're allowing them to do it and to continue. So if you're dealing with a very difficult person, what's their MO? What's their mission? Is to push you against the corner. So you're stuck in that corner and you're not getting out. So that way they can control you. Whatever they say you're going to do out of fear, you're like, oh my God, I'm already stuck. I can't move. I can't do anything, right? So visually, if you look at that, you know that you're stuck in a corner and you have this overload of fear to get out of that. So your job is, not to necessarily play defense, but to play offense. You have to come out of that and be like, facing the other person, not head to head. And so if you allow the other person to put you in that corner to the point where you can't get out, it means you've done something wrong and they understand that they can do that to you. So now the whole idea is to go work with a divorce coach and say, okay, so how do I do this so that the next time she speaks to me or the next time she sends me an email, it's not going to cause like a trigger. And then I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to respond instead. When you start to show up in a different way, the other person's going to say, hey, look at that. I can't even push Josh around anymore. I used to just say one thing and then throw him like, a bullseye between the eyes and he would go straight to the corner and he wouldn't even move and he'd be quiet for a month. And now I can't do that. So I'm trying and pushing him and he's not budging. Exactly. Because now Josh knows what to do. And he's not going to allow that. Hence, all the craziness and the madness starts to die down because they just can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And speaking to that as well, in my own personal experience, plus other men that I've coached, is that sometimes that also has the reverse effect where you stop kind of feeding them and then they get even more angry and then it ramps up for a while. But a lot of the times that ramp up only goes so far, unless the person is just really persistent and consistent, which I've had several experiences of myself. But here's the deal. Here's the thing that I've learned from my own life and coaching other men. Even if they dig in deeper because of how you're acting now, and it's different than how you were acting, so maybe that's a trigger to them, even though you're being kinder or whatever else, right? Because people have their own stories. They're going to act however they're going to act. There's nothing you can do to control that. But what I would say is what I've learned from my life is that even if that's true, my life is so much better because it doesn't affect me anymore. And then if it's not affecting me anymore, it's also not affecting my kids anymore, which is what I'm more concerned with. So the other person can act however they want to act. I'm more concerned about how is that affecting me? How's that affecting my relationship with myself? How's that affecting my relationship with my higher power? How's that affecting my relationship with my kids? Because that's all we can control anyway, right? And you're not going to get this advice from attorneys. Let me just give one more example.
Or a therapist.
When I was deciding that I was going to do this podcast, one of the people I called to talk to about it was actually my old divorce attorney. Not anymore, obviously. I've been divorced for several years now. But I asked her, I was like, what are your thoughts? You know what she said? Don't do it. I was like, why not? She's like, well, you just got to be really careful what you say. It's all written. It's all out there, etc. And I get all that, which is why I don't come on here and, start bashing my ex or anything, just like you aren't doing. Because first of all, it's not helpful to anybody, including myself or audience or anything else. And the other thing is it keeps us in that victim mentality, right? The two of us, just given our stories, could spend the whole 40 minutes or so of this podcast just bashing our exes and being the victims. And who is that going to help?
Them.
Right.
It's going to help my husband and your ex-wife.
Right.
Exactly. That's the problem, is that people don't understand that the more you talk about it, the more you repeat the stories and the sagas and the dramas and he said, she said, this, that, whatever, the more you're reliving it. You don't want to keep reliving it. You want to know it, learn it, understand it, and move on. So what you're talking about is that you've evolved, and that is the exact point of divorce. Divorce is about two people who should just no longer be married anymore. That's it. You and I don't get along. We shouldn't be married. Therefore, I'm going to go and grow and evolve and transform into the best version of myself. And you should be doing the same, because it just doesn't have to be that we're going to be married forever. It could just be that you and I are just supposed to be co-parents or coexisting or whatever it is. So when you keep playing the victim and you keep circling back into that same story, you're just not able to get out of it anymore, because that's what human behavior loves to do that. You know, we're innately, we want to tell the story, and every single person that's going to listen to us, we're going to repeat the story just to get the sympathy and the empathy and to get the, oh, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? You know, that's what women love to do as well. They love to just talk and repeat and all of that. But one other important thing is, for men and for women, I tell this to everybody, you have to understand how men and women function. If you understand how they function innately, then it'll help you understand what he or she is doing and why she's doing it. So we have a bunch of resources and articles, especially on our website. We have a whole divorce blog, and we talk about the masculine and the feminine a lot, because it's really important to understand innately, like, how does a man function? Like, why is a man more prone to divorce and to depression and isolation? You know, it's because he focuses more on the past, and depression is thinking about the past. Why is the woman more prone to anxiety? Because she's always worried about the future. What's going to happen? Am I going to have food at the end of the month? Am I going to have this or that? So if you just think about how we function as human beings, you'd understand that part of their behavior is normal. Then what you have to do is, like, take it one step down and say, okay, if that's considered to be normal, then how do I cope? And that's really all this is about. Figuring out how to cope, how to find the strategies, and how to be able to restructure and rebuild this new puzzle of yours.
So much good stuff. So much good stuff. And again, just for all the listeners, viewers, go check out the resources right now. Check out our website. Bunch of free things on there as well, I noticed, which is great. So I do want to mention one other thing that you just talked about, because I think it's so key and it was so pivotal in my learning and healing process. And that is the concept of venting. So men and women do this. We're not going to make only men do this, only women do this. That's bullshit. Men and women do this, and they do it maybe for different reasons. I think the reasons that you said make a lot of sense. Probably either want sympathy, want some empathy, or want some validation, right? We want to be able to be the hero. It's okay if we are the victim sometimes in our own heads. But here's what I've noticed, and you said the exact same thing. This goes back to our therapy conversation. Why does therapy not work if you're going there for 20, 30 years? Usually because of the fact that you're using the same victim mentality to talk about the same shit that happened 20 years ago, that frankly, you should have been able to go for a few sessions, move on, grieve it, and then move on. Stop talking about it. Stop being resentful for what that fucking person said to you 35 years ago. No one cares anymore. So one of the things that I had to do when I was going through my divorce process is there was a specific person in my life. I'll just mention this because I don't want to throw them under the bus. A family member that I was close to, we talked to often, and pretty much every time I got on the phone, I would end up venting to them, and then they would end up venting to me, and it kind of became this bitch session about my ex. And frankly, I needed that a few times because I needed to get some of the shit just out of my head, right, to a safe space. So I understand the concept of that. But that was a very brief period of that time. After that, it was just living in victim mentality and just spewing. And frankly, no matter what you say, you believe, right? Especially if you say it enough. There's a story about one of the reasons why the Nazi concentration camps were so successful at just beating people down emotionally was that oftentimes the guards would just go around and just tell the people that were there that they were trash, or some other word of that. You're trash. And then they consistently said it every single day. You're trash. You're trash. You're trash. You're trash. You're trash. You say that enough, I start believing it. You say that to me every single day for years, I start believing it. Then if I say it myself, or if I go to my other person that's next to me and be like, oh my gosh, I must be trash because this happened, or I'm the victim because of the fact that I didn't do anything to be here. It's all everybody's fault, everything else. That might all be true, especially in that circumstance. It definitely would be true. Clearly, that person didn't do anything to be in that position. But if you live the victim, at least for myself, and then you start venting about it all the time, that's not helpful. That just gets me in that mindset. Instead of if I'm repeating to this family member all the time, like, oh my gosh, this is what she did, and this is what she did, and this is what she did. And all I'm going to see her, it's a cycle. I'm just going to see her as this is what she did, this is what she did, instead of here's what I'm learning today. Here's how I'm moving forward. Here's what I want for me. Here's what I want for my kids.
Yeah. So this happens to a lot of people and they fall trap into this. And this is why I always say that your friends and your family should not be your go-to neutral support team. They're not neutral. First of all, they are definitely going to be on your side. They have a vested interest. Maybe they want you to keep the house so that this or that, whatever, because they have a vested interest in you and your money or your whatever. Your friends and your family should be there to help you to make sure that you sleep, you shower, you wake up in the morning and you take your kids where you have to go, and that you laugh and you're having a good time. That's it. They should not be there to give you legal advice or give you financial advice or to be there to be your therapist, because the information that you're going to get from them could be so misleading that it could lead you down the rabbit hole and you had no idea. I had listened to my parents because none of us had gone through divorce. So we had no experience with divorce. Like, I was really the first. And they gave me all this great advice. And I made the biggest mistakes. I lost a ton of money. I made the greatest mistakes and I shouldn't have listened. Why? Because their advice was emotional based. And I needed logic. And I needed to know what would happen if I do this. What will happen in a year or 2 years or 5 years from now, and take me down that path. And they would not have done that because they didn't know how to do that. That's why you always have to have separate people to help you for different things. You have your friends and family for your everyday emotions, right? Or your everyday well-being. Then you have your divorce coach to help you move forward in life, keep your eye on the goal and make sure you don't regress, but instead you keep progressing and keep taking that inch forward towards whatever this new life is that you want to have. Then you have your therapist in case something happened in the past that you feel like you need to deal with, but it should be short term unless there's a lot of stuff going on, which makes sense that you have a lot to cope with. And then you have your lawyer to deal with your legal stuff. So you see how each person has its place in the puzzle? So the greatest mistake we make is that we say, I don't need any of these people. I just have my friends and my family, my lawyer. So now I've combined everybody's work into one, and then I get disappointed that I spent $200,000 on my divorce. Why? Because I didn't know any better. And then you go back and say, I wish I knew. I wish someone told me. I wish I would have done it differently.
Absolutely. And I can speak from two sides of this experience right now. You know, I have coached people in the financial world for years and years and years and years, a lot longer than I've coached in this world. And I've coached men for years and years and years. And I've coached men now divorcing more recently. And I can tell you a commonality with all three. And with all three, family and friends, people that really authentically love you, love me, love everybody, they want the best for you. So it's not like this advice is coming to fuck with you. The advice is coming because of the fact that they really think that they're helping. They really do. But intentions don't matter in this space, because what I've seen, so let me just go to the financial world, which is the same as the divorce world. Bad advice has cost my clients 6-7 figures over the years. Easy. Bad advice during a divorce, if you care about your kids at all, do not listen to family or friends, because bad advice from family and friends will keep you from your children. The court will give you less time with your children. Bad advice keeps you in this negative victim mindset for years when you don't have to be there. And that's, again, this is not their intention, but intentions don't matter. We gotta fit. It's just the same reason that I have coaches in my life, right? I need other people that don't have a vested interest in like me making them happy to tell me what I really need to hear.
Exactly.
So, you know, as I know we got to wrap up here, but I just have, I guess, kind of one question for you, because I think for me, what would have been the most helpful in having a coach going through that process is just my vision for the future. I couldn't see anything in the middle of divorce. I was so overwhelmed with everything. I just shut down. Like business, I wasn't doing well. As a dad, I wasn't doing well. As a friend, I just kind of shut down during those couple years of my life. How do you help, or what can you leave people with kind of this vision of how do we set up a vision of what post-divorce looks like?
just like you would in business, you create a business plan, right? You know where you want to go financially. You have some plans and all of that. For your divorce is the same thing. You need to have a future plan of what your life is going to look like at the end of the day. And then every day you keep looking forward to, is this inching me forward towards that goal accomplishment, or is it going to regress me? And working with a divorce coach will always make sure that you're being held accountable and that you're always inching forward and you're leaving all the crap and all the stuff that's holding you back, that negative stuff, holding it back so that you can just keep moving ahead. So if you're feeling very overwhelmed and you're not sure what to do, I would highly recommend that you speak with a divorce coach and you have that budgeted, that it's part of your, legal process, your divorce process, is to make sure that you have that constant support.
Awesome. Ravit, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, for everybody listening and watching, you have two people here to help you with divorce. I would strongly recommend that you check out the show notes, check out all of the amazing resources on Ravit's website, because I've looked at several of them and I'm really impressed. And pick up a copy of her book, Unwanted Nasty Divorces. So again, thank you so much for being here, Ravit. Appreciate you. And until next time, we'll see you later, you derelicts.